Good morning, everyone. This is David Bodorf, Executive Director of the Association of Indiana Counties, and I appreciate people logging in and participating in this webinar. Once we realized that the property tax payments penalties were going to be delayed till July 10th, we obviously knew that it may create some cash flow problems for many local units of government, and we immediately started conversations with the bond bank to talk about what they could do to be of assistance. And it's been a few weeks since that announcement's been made, and they put together a program to be of assistance to local units of government, try to make it very easy and efficient. If you have to do some kind of short-term bond to help with cash flow. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Wooler, and Mark's going to lead us through the program. And if you have any questions, please use the chat box to ask your questions, and we'll get to those probably at the end after all the slides are through. So Mark?
Good morning, David. Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Thank you for spending part of your Tuesday morning with us, learning more. I hope you are all doing safe and well and able to shelter in place. The work that you do in the counties around the state of Indiana is so critical, and I know this is probably but one of many things that you've got on your plates right now. And so I just want to first thank you, David, for convening this. Thank you for looking at the bond bank as a partner and a resource. We certainly, I think, appreciate and empathize with everything that you've got going on in these crazy times right now. So thank you for the work that you're doing and continue to do during this disruption with COVID-19. The bond bank, we're not on the front lines of healthcare by any means, but really we exist from a financial perspective to to assist local units of government through tough times when they need assistance. And the bond bank, so I should get into it. The bond bank is a public sector entity, much like yourself. And so we're from a quasi-state agency and from the state of Indiana. If you've not worked with us in the past, our mission is local units of government. So we exist to serve you at the county level, all the way down to the small as a township level, work with libraries, schools, police, fire protection districts, even as large as state entities. So really we're kind of that financial conduit to units of government. We are public sector serving public sector. And so really our small role in this COVID-19 situation we find ourselves in is looking at the tools and resources we have, because we know this is causing a financial crunch, as David said, be it to you or to units within your county. I want to take a quick minute to introduce the team who you have on the phone here. Got myself, Mark Woolner, again, the director of the bond bank. Many of you know Ron Mangus. Ron is director of operations with the bond bank. Has been with the team for a long time and has worked through many difficult times and situations, and such a great resource to have as we lean into solutions related to COVID-19. On the professional side, Dennis Otten is our local unit of government counsel with Bose McKinney and Evans. Angie Steno is the bond bank's municipal advisor, may heard called financial advisor with Crow. And then Bradley Bingham is our bond counsel with Barnes and Thornburg. I want to put names with faces because it's so hard, I know, working remotely, but we are all in this for local government, and so our team is standing by. And that's one of the neat things about the program we're about to talk about, is that it's kind of we wrap your arms around you. We know you don't necessarily do this cash flow financing on a daily basis, but this team does and has for over 30 years. And so the folks you see in front of you will be the ones assisting you through every step of the process, should you choose to use the bond bank's program. David really did a great job covering this. The executive order, very necessary for Indiana, obviously will have ripple effects as we see what distributions look like for local units of government. And Indiana local units are so good about budgeting, and this is just that unexpected, out of your control, through no fault of anyone, your cash flows, your revenues are more than likely not going to come in when anticipated and the amounts anticipated in that first settlement. And so that really brings us to the why we're here at the bond bank is we looked around, as David said, we started talking about the resources and tools that we've got at our disposal. And thankfully, we've got a tool that is called the Advanced Funding Program. It's really a long way of saying that for over 30 years, as you can see, since 1989, we have provided cash flow assistance to units of government in Indiana. In most years, as you probably, most normal years, the program gets kind of normal use from some of those bills that are due that with a different timing cycle from when revenues come in. This year, we looked at this tool and said, we need to scale this up and we need to make this bigger and more accessible in anticipation of the need due to COVID-19. I think many of you are probably familiar with what a tax anticipation warrant is. Just that, again, that ability to borrow in anticipation of future revenue that's coming. One of the unique things about the bond bank, again, being a public creature like yourselves, one of our advantages that we would offer to you is a concept called pooling. So that's where we're able to not only issue one library's or one town's tax anticipation warrant individually, we'll wrap you all together in a pool. And by doing that, you're controlling, we can't control the market or what the interest rate's going to be at the time of issuance, but what you can control is how cost effective and efficient you are in getting to market. And one of the things about the bond bank's program is that you're choosing to be efficient by sharing costs among all the participants. So again, we've got the bond counsel provided for you, we've got the municipal advisor provided for you. Those costs, again, are spread across all our participants and then baked into the interest rate. So you're not paying any out-of-pocket costs with this program. And I hope that goes without saying, that last bullet that you see on the screen is that hands-on assistance in going through the application, preparing a cash flow to determine if you need to borrow, and if so, how much you need to borrow. And I should say, I hope, I don't know if we mentioned this off the top, we would love your questions. So as we get through this, you should see a questions drop down in your menu, your navigator menu. You'll be able to type in a question, either share that to us privately, send it to everyone. And throughout, we will work through questions. The team is on the phone. We'll be happy to work through any questions that you might have if you use that questions function. So please, just as you think about things, drop them in and we will pick those up along the way. Let's pull the camera back and get kind of a big kind of Google Earth view of what this process looks like. It is, I think the first starting point is what's called a participation survey. So the two key words on that first jumping off point is our participation survey. You'll find that on our website, and I will get you the link for that. That is simply a one-page indication of interest. So, it's non-binding, I ought to say. So it is simply a one question. Hey, I might need some cash flow assistance this year. What that does is raise your hand to let our team know to reach out to you, to get you the materials, and then to work with you to see if indeed you need to borrow. And then, so as I said, we'll send you the application packet. You'll then apply. We'll work with you through the application and cash flows, and then disperse that financial assistance to you. So that is the program, the process, really, as it's existed, as I said, for 30 years. What we knew with this being such a unique situation, we knew we had to make the program customizable because different counties will be affected differently. We realize that. Certainly different counties have the percentage of escrowed property taxes coming in is different across counties, and those escrowed property taxes, as you well know, are not subject to the waiver, and so ought to still come in on time. And we know different units have different payments going out at different times. So the timing of when that need occurs, if that need occurs, is going to vary entity by entity. And so we wanted to make sure that we didn't take a one-size-fits-all approach to this issue. And so are offering 4 closing dates for funding disbursement for this 2020 middle year program. And again, I think the key message we want to send is we remain flexible. So there's different points of entry for you, really, again, based on your particular need. And should later need arise, we'll always consider adding more opportunities for funding. And let's just jump right in and see what that schedule looks like. This is a very kind of a busy slide, but I think if you want to look at kind of that last row on your screen, really want to emphasize we've opened up 4 opportunities at a minimum to access the program. The first, if you had needed funds, even in the next 3 weeks by May the 7th, those folks, a lot of those folks are already in, and we're working through their cash flows and applications right now. And for others, as you start to assess kind of what the impact of the executive order and COVID-19 will be, end of May, end of June, and end of July are opportunities to enter the program. And I think the one thing I would emphasize is if you mark on your participation survey if you mark on your participation survey that you may need to participate, and you indicate the date you think you may need to participate, that remains flexible to change. So if you think, gosh, end of May, may be a critical time for us, but as it turns out, that need may not actually hit until later June or July, we can easily shift you between the different pools. But there's always going to be a home for you within one of these pools, except perhaps this first Thursday pool on May the 7th, and that we're getting awfully close now to having needed resolutions and ordinances adopted. But for that end of May, end of June, and end of July, there's still plenty of time to put together applications and cash flows and access the program. And again, as it notes, should needs continue to arise, we remain nimble in response to this pandemic, and we hope, I think like everyone, that this works its way through and we're back to normal here soon. But if need continues, we're certainly monitoring that situation closely and we'll adjust the schedule accordingly. So I've mentioned a couple of times the participation survey. So if you look at inbondbank.com/advanced-funding-program, and maybe someone on our team can type that into the chat function, so you can just copy and paste that. That would be great. You can copy and paste that into a browser. That would be wonderful. But in that red rectangle is the participation survey, and you can complete that through an online survey form where you can submit electronically or access a fillable PDF. Again, I can't emphasize how real simple that is. It's just raises your hand to say you may need to participate, allows you to choose a month in which you think you'll need funding, so we can start to line up your timing, and it allows our team to reach out to you and provide you the materials that you need to start the process. That's literally a screenshot of what the website looks like. Thank you, Brian, for getting the web link up in the chat box. So I think, folks, you can just, if you're able to just click there, it looks like it's even a hyperlink, so you may just be able to click there or copy and paste that out. The application, if you remember that kind of Candyland map with the different squares of start here and then go to this square and then go to this square and then go to this square. After you do the participation survey, I mentioned that I would send you both an application and a cash flow. You may be asking what those two things are. The application really just gives us information about you. And some of that we may have if we worked with you in the past, but again, we want to make sure in these interesting times that we've got the right email, the right phone number, et cetera, because we know that all of us hopefully are working from home or from safe locations, and those emails and phone numbers, maybe cell phone numbers or personal emails, just given the situation. So again, the application just gives us a rundown of your debt profile, your operating profile. We've streamlined this considerably this year, again, in response to COVID-19. And this will be information that if we were to sell these in the capital markets to investors, in the private markets to banks, or possibly even to the new Fed program you may have heard about, this is information they may look for in assessing these notes and whether to invest in them. So we take that application information and then provide you an Excel template, which is really just a great budgeting tool. It shows a cash flow template and asks for your historical revenues and expenditures, and then projected revenues and expenditures. And we recognize it can be difficult to project what revenues will look like in these uncertain times, and that's exactly what Angie and her team are here to do. And I'm sure if you have any questions, kind of on a thumbnail level of, how do we project revenues over the summer and the fall, given the uncertainty, we can certainly talk through some of that here on this webinar even. Let's jump into questions and answers, and we've got looks like I want to make sure I'm seeing all the questions. I've got one question here in the chat box regarding timing of borrowing. So let's, if I can advance us back, that's a fantastic question. So the question, does the entity need to borrow for the full 6 months, or can it borrow for a shorter period of time? And I think I'm glad that question's been asked, because that's a third change that we've made to this program in response to COVID-19. Typically, I think the question recognizes that typically a tax anticipation warrant may be a 6-month or at most a 1-year obligation. But we know many of you wouldn't want to be borrowing or wouldn't have to borrow but for the situation. And so we are working on creating early prepayment dates so you could borrow for shorter periods of time. If you just want to get in, bridge that short gap and get out again, our goal is not to lock you in anything long term. And so the answer to that question is yes, the entity can borrow for a shorter period of time. The question says about 60 days. I think that's exactly around kind of the time frame that we're looking at for the ability to prepay and get out. I'm looking at other questions. This is a great time if you have questions about the program. Our entire team here is on the webinar, and we are happy to have a dialogue with you. We'd love to hear what you're hearing, what you're seeing, how you're feeling about this, because that helps us go back and shape the program and make it better for you, who are ultimately the people we're here to serve. So I'll wait maybe just a minute for any other questions here to come in. Got a question here that says, can we talk about Indiana Code 36-1-8-4, which deals with cash flow purposes internally by allowing the unit to borrow from internal funds. So anytime I see the statutory site, I think, Brad, if you're on the line, Brad Bingham, our counsel, I will open that up to you to respond to that question. If
sure.
You can see
that's thanks, Mark. I mean, that's that statute 36-1-8-4. Essentially, what it does is it allows any political subdivision, so that would include counties as well as any city or town or school corporation. You're able to, if you have a sufficient cash balance in a fund, you can do an inter-fund borrowing to another fund for which you project a deficit. Now, generally speaking, that fund from which you borrow and from which you make the transfer, you have to move it back into that fund by the end of the year. There is a provision that allows you to extend it for an additional period of time if there's an emergency. But the overall concept is to allow political subdivisions, in essence, to cover their own cash flow deficit in a particular fund. So I would ask that you probably should check with your local council or your municipal advisor if you have further questions about that process.
Thank you, Brad. Maybe we got 2 more questions on, which I appreciate. I see, Angie, this one looks like it may be for you. It says, I use an Excel spreadsheet for cash flow. Can we use that versus the Indiana Bond Bank template?
Yeah, I think we want to make this as easy as possible. So ideally, we need to have the information to look the same because we do have to share our cash flows with rating agencies, as Mark mentioned. However, if you have your cash flows already set up in something you use, if you could just submit those to the bond bank, we can take that information and put it in the template for you. So again, we want to make this as as easy as possible. So if you already work from a tool and really would find it burdensome or maybe just difficult to get it to conform to the bond bank template, I would just ask that you send what you have in Excel to the bond bank, and then we can take a stab at getting it into the template and maybe just follow up with questions if we had it, but happy to make that as easy as possible as you're completing the process.
Thank you, Angie. Next question is from Chad. Chad asks, do you offer a line of credit or just a set amount for the loan? Angie, do you want to talk about how the borrowing amount is set?
Sure. So this is, it's not set up as a draw loan. So what we're really looking to do is determine what is that borrowing amount, what is that shortfall that will cover you through the rest of the year. And for some of you, that may only be a month. Maybe you have 1 month where you run into a cash flow deficit, or for others, maybe you need to have those funds outstanding for 3 months. So that's really what we're doing. So we would loan the full amount of the dollar that you need, and that amount is set on a formula that I'll get into in a minute. But we would loan that amount at one time on one of those disbursement dates, and then, as Mark mentioned, as property taxes then are receipted, then you would have the opportunity to prepay those based on a number of days' notice. Now, in determining what you can borrow, the cash flow template itself is really the tool for that. And we really are looking at the largest deficit. So what month you run into the largest cash flow need for the second half of the year compared to 80% of your property tax levy. So the limitation we're really looking at is 80% of that tax levy and expected receipts for that second half of the year. So we can't allow you to borrow up to 100% of that certified levy. There is a cushion that we do require. So the program itself limits you to 80% or lesser of your largest deficit.
Thank you, Angie. Got a question, Brad, you may want to jump in. I don't know that Dennis, our local unit of government counsel, is on the line. We've got a question about what the approval process looks like at the local level for this.
Yeah, in terms of the approval process, and that's something I think, Mark, you kind of touched upon. Entities that participate in the bond bank's program, all of the documentation, the process, the closing documents, all of that is prepared by the bond bank's local unit of government counsel, which is Bose McKinney and Evans, and the bond bank covers the expense for that. So as part of that process, once you have turned in your application and you're ready to move forward, we would have the local government council prepare an ordinance that for your county council in your context to adopt, to authorize the issuance of the tax anticipation. And then again, as we get closer to the closing date, you'd receive closing documents and have instructions as to how to sign those and when those need to be returned to the bond bank.
Thank you, Brad. These are great. Keep these coming. Next question we received is, when will we know application costs and interest rate payments? That's a great question. I know one thing that's great about Indiana units of government is we are, I think all of us are so cost conscious and want to do right by our taxpayers and our customers and our citizens. And So there's no out-of-pocket costs, and of course that's not to say that there's no costs associated with this program. Really, we will know what that interest rate is kind of when we get to market. And I wish I could predict, and I'm sure many of you have been following these financial markets. They are, they're changing, daily, and they do that all the time. But I think I'll share historically how we've operated the program for 30 years, I think with really good results. If you've talked to anyone who's used our program, the bond bank's got a strong name in the market. We're very efficient in our pooling process. And as we get closer to the time when we're ready to price, let's go back to that calendar. So if we were to get closer to that May 28th date, we'll look and determine what the best lowest cost will be for you, whether that's capital markets, whether that's a bank placement, whether that's a placement with another investor. Our goal is always to get you the lowest interest rate. And I can tell you in kind of back in what feels like forever ago, even just back in January, our spread with this pool against what the market index was I guess was relatively tight. So we were able to price very close to that index, and then with the costs and the rate, I think had really favorable feedback from our participants this past January on what interest rates were versus what the market was at for their note for the exact same program. And again, I can't predict what our spreads are going to be. We have this potential option of the Fed being potentially a purchaser. We still have yet to understand or get guidance from them on exactly what their criteria are and how they'll price, which is very important, obviously, to us, and we're monitoring. All that's to say, this is an all-in program, and we are looking at every potential placement option to get you the lowest cost of funds. Let's see. All right, so we got another question that says, many entities may expect an August early advance based on July collections. If we realize the August early draw is less than anticipated, can we borrow in August or September? If anybody else wants to take a crack, I think maybe real brief.
Sure, Mark.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
This is Ron Mangus, Director of Operations. For entities that need funds after the last scheduled closing date, July 31st, if there is demand for a draw or to borrow in August and September, the bond bank would certainly offer that. So we will be flexible, but as we know more information and if there is demand, we will provide additional closings or additional borrowings in August and September.
Thank you, Ron. That is perfect. Well said. Let me make sure I'm not missing any other questions here. I hope you know you can always contact us as questions come up. I know sometimes they tend to do that right after I leave the webinar. Just let me take one last look. So barring any other questions, it looks like I just want to, I think, one last time to say thank you for hosting us here, David and AIC. And I guess two last things I would leave you with are that program participation survey. If this seems like a tool that you might need to use, or even that you might share with other entities in your county who may need it, it's inbondbank.com/advanced-funding-program. I think Brian from our team shot that hyperlink in the text box to you. And if questions pop up, as I was saying, please don't hesitate. We've got a mailbox dedicated to this particular program. It's midyear at inbondbank.com. That's being monitored just like a regular email inbox, and our team will respond to that in a timely fashion. For now, I would just thank everyone for your participation, your attention, your questions, and your engagement. Again, thank you for the work you're doing on behalf of Indiana during these critical months, this critical time. We stand alongside you. We're here to serve. And so please, if you have any questions, have any needs, reach out to us, and our team is standing by. Thank you so much. And thank you, David.
Thanks. Appreciate it.